On 4th November 1914, the British ship Endurance crossed stormy seas and was moving towards the world's most dangerous and mysterious continent, Antarctica.
A crew of 28 people was aboard this ship. The expedition was led by a determined British explorer. They had a dream.
He dreamed of achieving what no one had ever accomplished before, to become the first person to walk across the entire continent of Antarctica.
You heard that right, friends. It was a mission that many believed was impossible, but the team was ready to risk everything for history.
Imagine attempting this with nothing but courage. In an era without smartphones or GPS, they had no modern technology to guide them. They faced the frozen wilderness.
Imagine this for a moment. There were no smartphones, no GPS, no modern technology, yet they were about to step into one of the coldest places on Earth.
Blinding snowstorms, freezing winds, temperatures that could kill in minutes. Yet his goal never changed, to walk across Antarctica from...
In the middle of relentless snowstorms, he wanted to cross the entire continent on foot, from one edge to the other.
But incredibly risky. Their ship would sail through the deadly Weddell Sea, reach Antarctica's coastline, and from there, the expedition would begin. Take a look at the map. The mission was to land at this exact location, begin the long trek toward the South Pole, and then keep moving until they reached the Ross Sea. Every step would take them deeper into one of the harshest places on Earth.
The mission was to land at this exact location, begin the long trek toward the South Pole, and then continue on foot until they reached the Ross Sea.
Their plan was to land here exactly and start trekking to the South Pole. After crossing it, they would continue on foot to the Ross Sea.
The journey would cover an astonishing 2,900 kilometers across one of the harshest environments on Earth.
This region is known as the Antarctic Peninsula.
Right beside it is the Weddell Sea, surrounded by Antarctica on 3 sides and covered by some of the thickest sea ice on Earth.
But what happened next was far beyond anyone's imagination. The hardships they were about to face would test every limit of human endurance.
Take a look at the map. These islands sit just off the southern tip of South America.
Right below them lies the Antarctic Peninsula, the gateway to one of the most unforgiving places on Earth.
Because the Weddell Sea is surrounded on 3 sides, the ice has nowhere to escape.
Over time, it builds into a massive, permanent layer of sea ice. This makes these waters incredibly dangerous to navigate.
The weather that day couldn't have been worse. And the Weddell Sea was just as unforgiving, with conditions growing more dangerous by the hour.
People warned the expedition leader to delay the mission. They believed moving forward under those conditions would be far too dangerous. But he refused to turn back. December 5th, 1914. Endurance pushed even deeper into the frozen Weddell Sea. Then the nightmare began. The sea ice was far thicker and more powerful than anyone had anticipated.
Trapped in the frozen ocean, the ice began to destroy the Endurance. Every man watched in silence. The ship sank beneath the waters, but they had not lost their will to survive.
The crew knew they could not stay. The frozen platform was breaking apart. Huge waves crashed over tiny boats. For days, they battled hunger and exhaustion. A small island appeared, Elephant Island. Elephant Island was far from any shipping route. The crew had solid ground beneath their feet, but Shackleton knew this was no rescue. They would take one small lifeboat. On April 24th, 1916, in a small wooden boat to cross the deadliest ocean. Storms attacked them day and night, but the leader refused to yield to save the men waiting behind. South Georgia Island. Hurricane-force winds, with their last strength, at last they reached it, but on the wrong side. Cross frozen mountains, or watch them disappear forever.
The exhausted crew stepped onto land, so 3 explorers began the option. Then sound broke the silence. They knew they had made it.
Rescue was within reach. The mission was far from over. 16 men were still stranded. The leader searched for a ship. Ice blocked every route. Attempt after attempt ended the same way. They made one promise. They refused to quit. Every man grabbed an axe. Antarctica didn't move, slipping away, nearly 60 miles gone. They couldn't sail. Winter brings endless darkness. Shackleton made his choice. Every day became colder. The ice squeezed the ship like a hand crushing a toy. Massive walls of ice closed in. The first cracks appeared. The ice was just getting started.
The ice has us completely immobilized, but morale remains quite high among the men. This ship is now our only home. We will not fail.
Then the Endurance vanished beneath the frozen sea. Their ship was gone. Now there was only one goal. Stay alive. No rescue. 28 men stranded.
We must push on. The ice does not wait. Every man must give his all today. They were completely forgotten. Food was disappearing, hope was fading. Then Shackleton unfolded his map. The only hope was reaching it.
Then the food began to run out, and the crew faced a decision no one wanted to make, so they stopped. Their ice was softening prison, a floating prison, trapped without knowing for how long.
They called their new home Ocean Camp, a camp built on a floating sheet of ice. The ship was being crushed, and suddenly it was airborne. Then it vanished beneath the ice. But after walking only a few kilometers, thin ice, the frozen wasteland, so once again, they made camp on a floating sheet of ice. Their food supply was running low. Each man got one biscuit a day, a little diluted milk. To survive, they would have to hunt the frozen wilderness.
But the truth was far more frightening. Their food was running out. And Shackleton knew it. He lost hope. If they lost hope, they lost hope.
It would take a long time. And the thing they would need most was mental strength. Because in a place like this, survival begins in the mind.
To overcome most challenges, you need to be mentally strong, and Shackleton's crew was about to discover just how powerful the human mind could be.
For many months, the ice sheet began moving in the right direction. Days became weeks. Then, on the morning of March 23rd, Shackleton saw something. For many months, the ice sheet began moving in the right direction. Days became weeks. Then, on the morning of March 23rd, Shackleton saw something.
As the fog began to clear, mountains appeared in the distance. Shackleton recognized them immediately. But seeing land, they had drifted so far past Paulet Island.
But between them, there was a massive wall of ice. Crossing it was almost impossible. Only 2 more islands stood in their path. After that, there would be nothing but open ocean.
So Shackleton went back to his map. He realized that if they continued drifting north, only 2 more islands stood in their path. Clarence Island. After that, between the southern tip of South America and the northern tip of Antarctica was the years. If they reached and knew the truth, they would almost certainly dice.
Meanwhile, shortage had become severe. Even the leftover scraps once set aside for the dogs, they held small cans of melted the ice. But each time, they could collect only a few. There was another detail. 28 were officially, but they were supposed to be only 27. Shackleton refused to let Blackborough join, but he hid aboard and was discovered. They ran out of food.
The crew had reached a point. They had no food, no fresh water, and no way to contact the world. A sea leopard. The crew hunted it, provided half a ton of meat. Their food shortage eased for months.
Then, on April 7th, 1916, after months of drifting across the ice, hope with the crew. But then, within just a few hours, the ice sheet beneath their camp was getting smaller. By now, it was only about 50 meters long.
Staying on it was becoming increasingly dangerous.
So Shackleton made a decision.
Eventually, they found another solid sheet of ice. Fireman Ernie Water. The rest of the crew rushed to pull him out before they could even catch their breath. The ice sheet split in 2. Shackleton was suddenly stranded on one side of the broken ice, while the rest of his crew was swept away into the darkness on the other side. No one knew what to do. A few crew members, and Shackleton was brought back to his men. After reuniting with his crew, Fireman was shivering violently. As nothing was done to light a fire, ordered and using wholeness to keep moving, dried the clothes on his body.
The poor man kept walking through the entire night, and eventually moved one way. They believed they would reach Clarence Island. They even considered Hope Bay. But finally, Elephant Island was their last hope. They were drifting on a melting ice sheet. Their fresh water was completely gone. Their lips were swollen thirst. They ate raw seal meat to survive, drifting toward Elephant Island.
Having been through hell, this rock seemed like heaven.
For the first time, not on ice.
They did not know, could not move legs, and Rickinson,
heart attack.
Somehow, he survived. Now only about 50 kilometers away from Elephant Island. The crew 1916. The 3 small boats reached the island ice and ocean. They were finally standing on solid land.
Still, the expedition pressed forward without turning back.
Then, on January 18, 1915, disaster struck. Endurance became completely locked in the ice.
Sea ice closed in from every direction, trapping the ship completely.
No matter what the crew did, Endurance wasn't going anywhere.
The mission was slipping away. The ice was thicker, stronger, but Shackleton refused to turn back. The ship became hopelessly trapped. They attacked the ice by hand, carried closer to disaster.
Days turned into weeks, trapped in the frozen sea. Winter was closing in, tightening its grip. The ship began to break.
Then, hope appeared. A long crack opened in the frozen sea. Bare determination, instead of escaping, carried them farther into the unknown.
But their biggest problem was still waiting. Elephant Island was completely uninhabited. No humans lived there. There were no rescue supplies.
Shackleton looked at the map, and he saw 3 possible routes to the northwest. And the third option, Wade, nearly 800 kips to the northeast.
The options were closer, but that meant crossing the Drake Passage. The leader knew what that meant. Super Island. He believed the sea would give them a chance, and they would achieve it, and the remaining crew would stay behind on Elephant Island. Their survival would now depend on a small boat crossing the most dangerous waters on Earth.
On April 24, 1916, the expedition leader and 5 crew members set out for South Georgia Island. But they were small wooden option. They entered the
for 4 hours. Then they resting in a tiny wooden boat. Waves drenched them. They were constantly vomiting. Meanwhile, the journey continued through the freezing darkness.
It was April. Winter was beginning in Antarctica. The sun appeared for only a few hours each day.
Those few hours of daylight were critical.
Hours became days. Water constantly poured. They had to pump it back out. Massive waves crashed over them. The boat nearly sank. It seemed they would, but they survived and kept moving forward.
They had some food with them, but there was another problem. There was barely enough room to sit upright. Even the leader's courage became unbearable, the journey was becoming too...
The storm suddenly became violent. The waves grew completely uncontrollable. The men had almost no strength left. Finally, their storm tossed their boat.
From one side to the other. Then, several hours later, the winds finally began to calm. There was only 1 mile left to go. Seeing the island,
all of them began paddling, but the waves were still powerful. The expedition leader began to seemed completely stationary, but in reality, they were fighting the storms, the wind, and the ocean.
From which they had begun their journey 522 days earlier. They hugged each other, but this was not your island. South Georgia Island was more than they had landed.
It was on the opposite side of the island from the human settlement. They now had 2 choices. They could return to the sea and sail 130 miles across the mountains on foot.
Cross this island on foot. So naturally, they chose the boat. But of course, there was another problem. Their boat had been badly damaged by the rough waves. They would have to cross the island on foot.
The alternative was to attempt crossing the island. South Georgia had never been crossed by anyone. The whalers considered the land completely inaccessible.
Crossing, they decided to rest. They stored their strength. There was no shortage of food on the island. Then, on May 16, at 3 in the morning, they began their journey.
Only 2 other crew members went with him. They were Worsley and Crean. They left their sleeping bags behind to make the journey as light as no one knew exactly where them across the mountains.
The snow was up to their knees. The mountains were so high they couldn't see beyond. Searching for a path, they found no way. They had to turn back again. Whenever
there is no way forward, and this happened 3 times after mountain. There was nothing beyond it, with a steep and dangerous slope.
With the mist finally clearing, they saw what they had mistaken for a frozen lake, but it was actually an arm of the sea. They climbed mountain after mountain, searching for a way through. Only a deep valley with a steep and... The situation looked grim. Fog had blocked their retreat. Darkness covered the path ahead. They literally carved their own path down the mountain. The situation looked grim. Fog had blocked their retreat. Darkness covered the path ahead. They could no longer turn back. Tied themselves together, cutting steps into the mountain.
After climbing through the mountains, on May 20th, 1916, They reached the Stromness whaling station. They had crossed South Georgia on foot.
But their journey was far from over. The final chapter begins in the next part. Subscribe to Believe and Achieve, and don't miss what happens next.